The roles of tank, healer, and DPS have been a staple in our RPG games for decades now. So now is the time that we dive into whether or not this system will work for Riot's MMO or not. The terms tank, DPS, and healer or support started popping up in the late 90s or early 2000s in the 4th edition of Dungeons & Dragons and EverQuest. While these games didn't expressly slot classes into these roles, the players realized that some of the abilities that they had access to just lent themselves to perform certain jobs more efficiently. An example of this being in Dungeons & Dragons, fighters and paladins were your ideal tanks, wizards DPS, and bards being your support. By the way, I'm live streaming a D&D campaign as a bard with some friends on Monday nights. Come check it out sometime. Again, these roles aren't enforced, but the tactics are there, and honestly, they make sense. Tanks are your big, beefy, heavily armored players that protect their teammates and deal with the enemies. DPS, or damage dealers, are, you guessed it, responsible for dealing damage and controlling the pacing of each encounter. Healers or supports are in charge of keeping their group alive or buffing them in some way. But why these three? Why not some combination of them? Why does this combo work so well? And can we ever escape it? Should we? These are the questions that I'm going to cover today in reference to the Riot MMO that is supposedly in development. In my research for this video, I came across another video by Adam Millard. His stuff is really good. Go check him out. He heavily inspired this video. In his research, he boiled RPGs down into 3 categories, and I would like to add a 4th. Player to enemy, enemy to player, player to player, and the 4th that I want to add is player to environment. Each of these interactions align with one of the Trinity roles. Player to enemy represents the things that the players do to the enemy. Typically, this would represent our damage dealers damaging down the enemy that we're trying to beat. Enemy to player is the role responsible for dealing with the interactions that the enemy does to the group, so typically, tanks. The player to player interaction is the category where your healers or supports fall into. They're dealing with keeping you buffed or making sure you don't die. Their interaction is from them, a player, to you, the player. Player to environment is something that everybody kind of has to deal with. There is maybe some exception to that, but it's not something that I'm really too worried about as needing its own role. I mean, imagine your party's fighting an epic dragon and you're playing some kind of geomancer or something, and so you're sent off to go deal with some random rock slide while the rest of your party gets to have fun killing this epic dragon. I just don't feel like that sounds very interesting. It would just feel weird if your entire purpose was to deal with environment interactions. So let's put player to environment to the side for now and focus on the first 3 types of interactions and why players will naturally sort themselves into those roles. The first big example that I can think of when talking about this is Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2 specifically was designed to defy the Trinity. When they introduced raid encounters, players immediately started to try to fill the roles of tank, healer, and DPS. And this isn't something that the devs wanted the players to do. The devs of Guild Wars 2 have tried very hard to avoid the Trinity being a core mechanic in their game, but the players did it naturally. This Trinity feels inescapable, like it's our default factory setting or something. I mean, there are real-life examples of this. Look at American football. If we treat the offense as us, the players, and the defense as the enemy, the linemen are the tanks, taking on the enemy-to-player interaction. The skill players like receivers and running backs are the DPS, or player-to-enemy, and your quarterback is the player-to-player support healer class, passing or handing off the ball. All of those different roles working in tandem to achieve victory. So, there are some benefits to using a Trinity system in a game. One, it makes the game more simplified and easier to understand for new players. New and veteran players only have to focus on their one job. Second, balancing is made much easier because classes are sorted into boxes that define their role, and those classes in each of those boxes are only balanced against each other, not everyone. Another pro to this system is that setting up endgame encounters is also made much simpler for devs and players. Tanks deal with tank mechanics, healers deal with keeping the raid alive, and DPS worry about killing the boss. The Trinity does come with a few downsides though, so let's talk about those. The first and most obvious one in my opinion is, what about the players that don't want to play strictly DPS or strictly a healer? What if they want some kind of hybrid? Having designated roles keeps these players feeling alienated and without a place in the game. The next con is one that I've seen outplay in a few different games, and that is, as a game's lifetime plays out, classes eventually become more and more homogenized. Everyone gets a movement ability, everyone gets exactly 3 defensives, everybody has mass AoE, everybody has a pure single target. Sometimes it just feels as though I'm playing the same class, but my spells look a little different. The last con for the Trinity system is it lets devs be lazy. It stifles innovation and out-of-the-box thinking. By making a game that only is going to require players to solve 3 different kinds of problems, encounters eventually get really repetitive. And you start to think, I've seen this before. So what are my final thoughts on the Trinity system? Do I like it? Do I not like it? Before I answer, go comment down below. What would you like to see Riot do for their MMO? Do you want to see the Trinity system? Does it work for you? Or would you like to see them try and really go outside of the box? Personally, I think this is an amazing opportunity for Riot to do something very creative in the RPG and MMO space that's not been done before. As for what that is, I'm not really sure. Because on one hand, the Trinity, it just makes sense. And as we've learned from Guild Wars 2, players kind of naturally sort themselves into those roles anyways. Is it really worth for them to try and fight that? Or should they just embrace it and make the best game that they can with it? If League of Legends is any indicator on what kind of game the MMO will be, we will probably see at least 4 roles, those being tank, DPS, healer, and support. Support being separate from healer because they would have the option to interact with the enemy and with the players. The Trinity just works because it gives everybody a defined job to do. And like it or not, most people enjoy having their defined role on a team. I think my final thoughts on the subject are, I want Riot to have defined roles, but I would like for them to step outside of the basic 3, to give themselves permission to experiment with these roles. Hey, if you've made it this far in the video, you obviously think that this is something that needs to be discussed, and you enjoy these types of discussions. On this channel, I plan on doing game reviews, doing theory videos, and a little bit of storytelling. Dropping a sub would mean so much to me, but if you feel like my content needs more work, please tell me how I can improve it down in the comments, and I'll see you guys for the next one. Deuces.